like some of the doors that have made, like there's like cleaning supplies in here. So I put something on there so she can't easily, and like on her bedroom door, I've got like a childproof thing on the knob. But it's more like for a toddler, I guess.
Well, she is incredibly active. Like she has great motor skills.
Yes.
No, that's the thing. Like,
and she's always been like, she's always been like this.
So the diagnosis hasn't impacted that.
No.
That's not part of it.
No.
Yeah.
No. It took her a while because she had a gait trainer for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
To help with walking, but she didn't start walking independently until 5.5.
Yeah.
So, so she's only been,
she's got a brand new
truly running around walking for
3 years.
For just a couple years.
She's got a brand new world to explore.
Yeah.
So,
it's a cloudy, somewhat chilly day in Noblesville, Indiana, where Josh and I are actually starting the day meeting this very active and fun-loving little girl in a family that was very welcoming and wonderfully authentic. I'm Seth Carnell, and this is the Go Shout Love podcast. This month, we are featuring 3 kids who all share the same Coffin-Siris syndrome diagnosis. If you've listened to the past 2 episodes, you've already met Stella and Oren, and if you haven't, listen to this one first, head back and hear those episodes. They are great families with great, insightful conversations. Now, Ruby is 8 years old and is described as sassy, sweet, and kind. All of that was on display when we had the privilege to meet her in late November. Let's just say there's a ball pit in her room, and watching her play with her brother Wesley and sister Willow, along with the rest of her family members, was incredible. We are very excited to share this episode with you for many reasons, one of which is the story of Ruby's medical journey from birth to her diagnosis and how she is doing on an everyday basis. Another reason is the open and honest conversation that we were very grateful to have with our parents, Eric and Julia, who help us cover the topic of divorce in a way that was very easy to listen to and engage with. Divorce isn't easy, and they graciously share with us how they co-parent Ruby in general, but also how they navigate her diagnosis and the challenges that exist with that. One thing is evident, Ruby is deeply loved by all. Leading this conversation is Josh Veach, our executive director of Go Shout Love. You will hear Ruby in the background playing hide and seek, and another game that I called Handing Random Things to Josh.
I mean, she's incredibly strong. I feel like for how little she is.
yeah, trying to hold her down for
Oh man.
IVs or like whatever.
Blood work
like,
or diaper changes.
She's
especially I'm assuming like the IVs and the like different tests.
The dentist is difficult.
When you know it's like stress inducing, pain inducing, and yet you know it's necessary.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's.
I mean, she had gotten to a point where she was, if a doctor walked in or even a nurse, if there's somebody that looked like they had scrubs on, like she knew and she would just start flipping out. She knew
what was coming.
Yeah.
But she's gotten better now, I think, especially with the ABA school and everything. Like they've helped to desensitize some of that stuff. That she'll go to the doctor's office now and let them, check her hard. And
we had an echo yesterday. We had an echo in her annual cardiology appointment yesterday, and which is just super stressful because those appointments in the past we've walked into it thinking that everything's good because like clinically she looks fine, but like so she has mitral valve stenosis in addition to Coffin-Siris syndrome kind of has this like whole host of other like body system deficiencies. So for Ruby, she has the gene that's affected in her, it's SMARCE1, which is like 3% of the population that have Coffin-Siris syndrome have that same gene affected. So she's like the rarest of the rare. So cardiology or, heart issues are what kind of go along with that. So she's had a few open heart surgeries. She's had her mitral valve repaired. So yesterday was just kind of stressful because it's just, we've gone into appointments thinking everything is good and functioning well, and it's not. And then it turns into like, we have to have surgery again. And it makes, I don't know, with all of her other health issues, it just makes it more complicated. Yeah. So luckily everything yesterday went well.
The tests are showing things that haven't shown symptoms yet on the outside.
Right. Yeah. Typically it's like she should be like really low energy, really lethargic. And we've had that in the past where she has been acting perfectly normal and active like this, but her mitral valve isn't functioning properly.
But you got good news yesterday.
Yes, everything is great. Yeah.
That's
So we go back in a year, and for us to have an appointment that we'd go to once a year is like a huge deal, because we were going like every 3 months, and a lot of her specialties, because we see cardiology, we see endocrinology, we see nephrology, we see genetics, we see hematology, like I think we see everybody except for pulmonology, to be honest with you, all the specialties. And there was a point where we were going like every 3 months, so that's a lot to like manage.
Pretty much from birth, because I mean, it was as soon as when she was born, they let us see her for a couple minutes, and then they were like, we got to take her over to the NICU, and they started just running gamuts of tests, and then it was every single day that we were sitting in the hospital, because she was at the hospital that we had her for a week. She was in the NICU there for a week, and then they transferred her to the women's hospital.
Thank you.
That had a lot more specialties and things like that. They transferred her down there for another couple weeks until she was big enough to go home. But it was every day they'd walk in and be like, so we need to talk about this. And
it's like layers of an onion type of thing.
Yeah. So it was literally each day was passing by, and then so it was like, so we're going to call in this specialty, and then we're going to call in this specialty. And so that she had, by the time we were done with it, within that first 6 months, we had almost every single specialty that there was out there.
Which was a lot, but in hindsight, looking back, I'm just so grateful that we had such a good medical team that thought to do that, because we've talked to other families that have this diagnosis that their kids are like 15, 16 years old, and they're just now finding out that this is what's going on.
Because they weren't as curious up front.
Or maybe they just didn't have, like, we were very lucky that we had, as soon as she was born, there was a neonatologist that was like, there's just like enough things that are wrong, quote unquote wrong, or off, that we're going to call in a geneticist, and we're going to have him come down and take a look at her. And I remember he came down, I had a C-section, so I'm still sitting in the hospital bed. Like, this was like, what, day 3? It was like, 2, 3?
2 or 3. It was right
And
after.
he walked in, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and he walks in and he introduced himself, and he said, I'm going to run some blood tests. I think she has Coffin-Siris syndrome. And I said, well, how do you spell that? And he goes, don't Google it. And then he left.
And this was day 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and we had gone into having her knowing that there was something was not right. Originally, they told us that she maybe had like a hole in her heart, and she was gonna have to have surgery right away, within the first few months. And like, that was it. Like,
and that was, you got that news right after birth, or
like
even during the
36
ultrasound?
weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. They sent me down to go get like a more intensive ultrasound at 36 weeks. And that's what they said. And they were like, we're going to test for Down syndrome. We're going to do all this blood work, just because she was measuring small, because she was only 3 pounds when she was born. So it turned into, we have kind of mentally prepared ourselves for like, okay, we're going to need to have a heart surgery, and then everything's going to be normal and fine. And then it started, like you said, like the layers of an onion, like it started like unraveling that it's like, it's not that at all. Like, they said she had ASD canal defect, and that wasn't it at all. It turned to like all these other things.
And that's what, it was.
And it was confusing.
Yeah.
And I remember
it was essentially, they told us, because of this ultrasound, they were like, most babies that have this defect have Down syndrome.
Right.
Like, it was kind of this telltale sign that they were like, so we had to then cope with that of like, okay, like, we're going to have, this little heart defect, not that big of a deal, potentially Down syndrome, like, all right, like, no big deal. Like, let's, we'll move forward. And then she came out, and then it was like, they were like, she definitely doesn't have Down syndrome. Like, and so it was like, okay. And then they're like, this heart thing that we thought that she had, it's not really that big of a deal, no big deal. And we were like, okay, well, great. And then, then it was just like day after day, it was like, so she doesn't have Down syndrome, but now she has this other thing that we could have never even known about.
So how did that initial, you said it was the geneticist that was their
that was what he thought she had, and it took 3 months to get the test results back, because I guess there's like one lab in Chicago that you can send this test to that does it, and you have to know, like, you have to be looking for this specific set of genes, and I think that's why so many other families don't get that diagnosis, because they haven't, unfortunately, been lucky enough to have a doctor that is looking for it.
So it's not like a regular, a typical genetics test.
Right. If you just did like a genetic panel, would not pick that up.
I see.
Yeah. Like when you do her genetics panel, I remember they told us like it looked fine.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know if you noticed or not, but she doesn't have a nail on her pinky fingers. So that's usually like the main marker. Because they also have called it fifth digit syndrome. So like on your toes or on your fingers, that fifth digit usually doesn't have a nail. And her nails are very like sparse. I think we've had to cut her toenails like 3 times in her life, and she's 8 years old.
Wow.
Fingernails are different.
Just like teeny tiny.
Yeah. So that was, I think, what tipped him off. But then there were just enough other things.
Yeah.
So we just, like I said, we're lucky. What does she want? We were just lucky enough to have somebody like, I don't know, in our corner that knew what to look for.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the neonatologist that was there, I mean, she kind of told us, she's like, you get 5
things that are off.
Abnormal things before they call in a geneticist. And so it was like, they basically, like every baby that comes out, they look and it's like, oh, if you have, something this here, you have like 5 things that like can be off and you can not really have a syndrome. But they're like, once you get past 5, then they're like, we got to call somebody in. And so that's when they called him in.
And she was comforting to us to know that like, and she said, there's a whole bunch of babies down there in the nursery that they may have something that maybe their families won't find out until they're 20 years old. Like you're lucky enough to know now and be on top of things. So I think when I look back on it, I'm just so grateful for that.
Yeah.
So I think it gets
still hard to take on in the moment.
Yes,
but
for sure.
There's this silver lining of, okay, we at least have some clarity on where to go from here.
Right. And I remember it was difficult just from my perspective because it's like I had just had a C-section. So I'm on one side of the hospital, Ruby's on the other side of the hospital in the NICU, and Eric's running back and forth. I mean, he's going over there, and I feel like they were giving you the information about her over in the NICU. So then you're coming back and trying to relay the information to me, and we're like having people draw us pictures to like understand. Like it was just because things were constantly changing within like hours. They were just finding.
And we weren't allowed to hold her.
Right.
And then
and
then once she got.
She had an NG, so she had an NG initially when she was born because she wasn't feeding. So feeding difficulties are a thing with Coffin-Siris syndrome. She has a G-tube now. She got that at
6 months?
6 months. You're right.
It was 6 months.
It was 6 months, yeah. Which that was, is she upstairs?
Because they didn't even want to do that
because
originally.
She was so little. That whole encounter was crazy. So we went to go see the surgeon to go talk about doing a G-tube. And she wasn't even 6 pounds yet. She was just shy of 6 pounds at 6 months. So the surgeon was like, I don't operate on babies less than 6 months old for a G-tube. I just don't. But our geneticist basically called in a favor and said, you have to do this. He said, it's going to be a long time before she gets to that 6 pounds. So you have to, because she doesn't grow very quickly. So that
would be scary.
So from there, from that appointment, we went to an ultrasound. It's like it was one of those things where we had like a full day of all these like specialty appointments. We went to go do an ultrasound for hematology because when she was born, they found all these calcified blood clots. So she has a blood clot.
She had a...
and she had hernia.
She had a hernia in her diaphragm.
Right.
So yeah, they were scanning all over to see if things had closed up because they want to make sure that hernia had closed up. Right. But it was one of those, the tech did the ultrasound and she's like, I'll be right back. So she left the room and we were sitting there like, okay, cool. She came back again with another person, like her supervisor. They did some more ultrasound and then they both left. They were like, we'll be back. And they both left.
We just looked at each other like, what's going on? This is not okay.
Obviously they're not telling us something. Yeah. And then they brought in an actual doctor then to come in and then continued with the ultrasound and was like, okay, so we need to talk about this. They were like, we found this stenosis in her.
She had pyloric stenosis. Yeah. So basically there was like a piece of like
this
muscle covering her stomach. So that was also part of why like she was throwing
up almost every single feed. Because the formula that we were putting in just wasn't able to get into her stomach. It was just blocked by all that muscle tissue and everything.
So that's like an emergent thing. Like you go right into surgery.
Yeah, they were like, we can't send you home. Like
this has to be addressed. Yeah.
So they were like, well, since we have to do this surgery on this anyways, they're like,
let's put the G-tube
in. So we had left that appointment thinking like, okay, we're not going to do the G-tube right now because she's not big enough. To then going back upstairs
we went back
to
into that
surgery,
same office to the same doctor.
Because otherwise, like, she literally can't live. She can't get nutrients.
Right. Yeah. And this had been going on for 6 months, and they were just treating her for like acid reflux. Yeah. And it's odd because that is typically in boys. Yeah. And usually they find it like right at birth. Yeah.
So they weren't even looking for it because it wasn't something statistically that she normally would have had anyways.
Right. Yeah.
So it was just one of those things that they just happened to find when they were doing this random ultrasound, looking at her stomach and stuff, and they were like, whoops.
Yeah. That's kind of a big find. That's
we need to fix this now.
So for years, whenever I would to go to a doctor's appointment, I would have an overnight bag in my car. Because from that, I was always like, we might not come home tonight because who knows? Because they were constantly just finding things. Yeah. It was crazy. It's gotten a little better, but
When she was born, so we spent a week in the NICU in Carmel, and then they transferred us downtown to the women's hospital, where she was there for 2 weeks. And at that point too, at the women's hospital, you're not allowed to stay. So it's, you come, you can spend as long as you want during the day, but then you have to leave. Like you're not allowed to stay there because it's just this gigantic room full of babies. And so parents can go there and you can sit, you have your own little tiny space, and you can
it's very like overstimulating because there's just
beeps going everywhere
and alarms, and it is, and it's dark and kind of sad, and it's sad to walk. It's like you walk through this section of like all these babies and there's nobody there with them, so it's like you feel like you do have to stay all day long because I wanted to go stay with all the other babies because they're but it's just it was just kind of a new experience every day, just trying to figure out what was going on and, take it all in. Yeah.
But we were lucky enough to only be there for 2 weeks.
Right.
I mean, there was a couple kids that had been there for months.
Yeah.
That were.
Yeah.
So between NICU and then the women's hospital, how long until she actually got to come home?
So that was Thanksgiving.
We came home the day before Thanksgiving, and she was born November 4th, so like 3 weeks.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it was like right at 3 weeks.
Really, for all the complications and all those layers, that's actually, I mean, I know that feels like eternity in the moment.
Right, right. Yeah.
But it was going through, I think just normal parents, like, you kind of get that, you're letting me, after like 3 days, they let you take this baby home.
Right.
And you're like, and now I have to take this baby home.
Well,
like now I need to know.
You have an older child, so you're at least you have some level of parenting knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
But like if that's your first,
but with her, she had the NG at that point, and they basically did a little school like there at the NICU. They were like, okay, here's how you change it. You're going to take this out of her nose and everything, and then here's your own stethoscope to take home so that you can make sure it doesn't go into her lungs, because if you flood her lungs with food, then she's going to die. So they're like, so you got to make sure it's in her belly, and they help you like learn how to check to make sure that you get it in the right spot and all of that stuff. And it was just kind of,
and I remember being terrified and like making you do that because I was so terrified.
Sure.
But I'm a nurse now, so what's the irony of that?
But you weren't a nurse then.
No.
Right.
So it's just, because of her, like that's why I went back to school to become a nurse. I just graduated last December. But it's like funny how looking back on things that it's like I was terrified to do a lot of stuff.
Sure.
So it's like. Yeah.
Because I did the first G-tube change.
And I had you do a lot of it because I was so scared, and it's just funny.
But I think just from, I was a lifeguard for a long time, but I've also managed pools, and I've been around a lot of just emergency situations, and so none of that stuff has ever bothered me, bodily fluids or anything like that. So, I didn't have any problems, I don't think, doing that, but it's just kind of this shock to you that they're like, okay, here's how you do all this stuff. Like, go home. Call us if you need us. Yeah. And it's like, you go home. And you're like,
and she was so tiny. Okay. Like she had just met the weight requirement to be able to go into the car seat to go home.
Because she had to be 4 pounds.
That's what we were waiting on. Like I think they would have let us go home a little earlier because I felt like they were confident in like our abilities to go home and take care of her. They were
probably more confident than you were,
right?
Just because you're like starting from scratch.
For sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That sounds awful.
Yeah.
So home after about 3 to 4 weeks. And then in about 6 months is when you had the surgery and the G2 placement.
Right.
What's her medical journey been like since then?
I think after that, I mean, it was like, that finally helped get a lot of the reflux stuff taken care of. So there was still some issues with that. We saw a lot of GI stuff. We started going down to Cincinnati for GI to help with just nutrition. I mean, her calorie intake is higher than some adults that she gets, just because she metabolizes so fast. She just doesn't gain any weight. And so, so we did a lot of, I think it seemed like a lot of that time was spent a lot on just food, just nutrition.
Yeah. And just following up with we had
a lot of
follow-ups with specialists. We were doing all the therapies, OT, PT, like behavior recreation therapy. Like we were doing all those therapies.
This is the other nice thing about Peyton Manning Hospital was that, I mean, from day one, they assigned us a caseworker. They were like, here's everything you need to fill out. Like, you're going to want to get her on the waiver for Indiana. Like, here's all of this stuff. And so, so that way we could have, in-home, we had some in-home therapy sessions, multiple times a week. And so, so we had some really good resources that were very, very helpful. And I think there's a lot of parents that don't have that.
Or they have to spend hours and hours hunting,
just researching and figuring out, like, what do we do? We left the hospital with a lot of information and a lot of help that they were like, we're going to fill all this stuff out. Like, here's what we're going to do to get you guys set up. But yeah, so we had a lot of in-home therapies with physical therapy and OT and feeding, so yeah, and just a lot of follow-up appointments just to make sure that things weren't getting worse in any of those areas. So it was a lot of time, I think, spent on that, on her nutrition and stuff, and make sure that we were getting the mixture of food right, so that she was keeping it down, so that she wasn't, throwing it up constantly.
Yeah. We had years of just like cyclonic vomiting, and nobody could figure out why. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. I mean, we were traveling to Cincinnati to see doctors, and then seeing doctors here, and changing her food. I think that's been the biggest thing, is we had a nutritionist in Cincinnati that helped us kind of formulate this mixture. It's almost like the consistency of peanut butter, but like we mix it up every morning, and it's got it's like the base of it. It's a product called Nourish. It's like a formula basically. And then we mix it with like baby food and sugar and oatmeal and vegetable oil. And it's thick, and it kind of was heavy enough to keep, to stay down in her stomach, and it's got the calories she needs to, be all over the place like she is. Yeah. But that has really been helpful. And then we have always been followed by cardiology, but how old was she when we things first started getting intense? I want to say she was like 3. Yeah. So so that's when we found out that she had mitral valve stenosis. So we
is that common with her? With her diagnosis, or is that kind of an outlier?
It's kind of an outlier. So mitral valve issues
usually
typically
something
happen
for kids, right?
Right. They typically happen in like the older population, like geriatrics. So we could just continue to follow up with cardiology, and they just kept watching it. So we ended up, it first started, they wanted to do a heart cath because her pulmonary pressures were extremely high. So they wanted to do a heart cath so they could make sure they were getting, like, it wasn't just like, an echo isn't like the best tool to look at that. They actually need to be like up there with a catheter to get a more accurate reading. So we did that.
Basically the valve was just too thick. It's again, just like the stuff that she had with her stomach, that muscle wall was just way too thick. So it wasn't allowing the blood flow, correctly, because it was just too thick. It wasn't, and so. So
we ended up doing that heart cath, and normally that's like something you go do and then you go home. But I don't know, I convinced the doctor can we just stay just for one night, just to make sure that everything's good with everything else she has going on. And when she came back from that procedure, her breathing was extremely erratic. It looked like she had like a tidal wave going up and down her chest. And we were like, something's not right. This is not normal. So
and they kind of were just
and they were like, oh, it's fine. She's coming out of anesthesia. Like sometimes, you know, your breathing can be weird coming off of that. And the nurses were like, oh yeah, like we'll just watch her. And I stayed, I think it was like around midnight. I was like, you need to have the doctor come look at her. This is not okay. So the doctor came up and took a look at her and sat down, and she said, okay, I think we're going to take her to the ICU.
Typically you guys are not in the room while we're doing this.
It was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. She turned paper white. Yeah. I mean, we were just standing there sobbing. Like this is it. We're watching it happen. Like it was awful. Yeah. It was awful.
And that was all triggered from the procedure?
Just from the procedure, from her being under...
Just the trauma.
Yeah.
And then, her body just couldn't take, take that. Plus...
Yeah. I think the valve was in worse shape than what they had initially thought.
So that was before the first open heart surgery. Yeah. Got it.
That's kind of what triggered everything.
But we also figured out, too, that she... her between the heart and everything, she then couldn't get the fluid off of her lungs.
Yeah.
Usually they hydrate you after those procedures and stuff like that. Well, then all of that was building up on her lungs and she couldn't breathe.
Right. Yeah.
And so then they figured that out, that she wasn't clearing that.
Yeah, she had pulmonary edema.
Scans, I mean, her lung scans were just awful because they came right in. They did a scan, and then you could just see them full of fluid.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, so then they started, getting her on the right drugs and everything and trying to get that all cleared off and everything. And so that's always been just a balancing act.
Right. Yeah. So that's what triggered us talking to a heart surgeon, and he initially went into, he's like, I think I can just repair her valve. I think I can repair it, and that'll give us some time. Because I think a lot of it is they want to wait until she's bigger. But some of the issue with that is she doesn't grow at a very fast rate at all. And she's failure to thrive is part of her diagnosis. So we went in for the repair, and an open heart surgery is extremely stressful especially with all of her other things. But they went in, and everything looked great and it was successful. And we made it a year.
Yeah, it was almost right at a year.
We made it a year, and we went back. We were doing echoes every 3 months, and then at the year mark, it's back to not being good again. So we went in again, and he said, I think I'm going to try to repair it again. So we're like, okay. So he went in and did the repair, and we hadn't even left the hospital yet. They went in, so they do an echo right before you leave to discharge, and within a week, the repair it wasn't working anymore. So then that's when it was like, okay, we need to replace this. The problem, ma'am, you're such a daredevil, Ruby. The problem was that mitral valve, if it's replaced, it's usually in older adults, and she's so tiny. So trying to find the right product to put in there took a while to figure out. And honestly, it's with all this too, it's waiting to have heart surgery. You would really think that it was one of those things that they're like, okay, we're going to go right ahead and do this. I mean, they sent us home, and I think it was weeks before we got the surgery scheduled. So it's just the waiting was terrifying.
Yeah.
And during that time, it was like you said, normally when she's having issues, then she's just lethargic. So I have, pictures and stuff of her that week of she would spend all day just laying on the floor.
Yeah.
And, she'd have an iPad or whatever, and, sitting next to her to kind of be listening to some program, but she'd just be laying on the floor the entire time.
Just no energy.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we
just
had one of those surgeries, after they knew that she didn't clear stuff off of her lungs very well, they ended up, again, they always, base things off of her size and everything like that. But there was one night I was with her, and so we always did we'd switch off in the mornings so the other person could go home and sleep. And I was there the one night, and she just was just staring off into space, and her eyes were just sunken in, like they had way overly dehydrated her.
They'd given her too much Lasix, so all the fluid just came off. Because I remember I walked in and I'm like,
I was sitting there. I was
what
like,
is happening? She looks horrible.
Something's not right. Like she just, and I've got pictures of it that she doesn't even look like the same kid. And it was again just having to like tell them like, hey, something is not right. Like you need to check this. Like this is not how she normally looks. Like we need to figure this out. And
if anything, I feel like we've had to really advocate
way
for
dehydrated.
Her.
So they fully dehydrated her. So then they had to like, but then it was just this constant balance because they're like, she can't have this fluid on her lungs, but we can't dehydrate her. So it's like this constant balance, like of the doctors trying to figure out the right combination. So every single time that we've gone in for these surgeries, it's been like, okay, listen, like here are all the things that we need to look for because she, doesn't react the same as normal kids do. Even with, when she would come out of surgery, they'd always keep her sedated for a couple days, usually because she had all these tubes
just
and everything.
Monitor.
And she had a chest tube in and everything. And so, they didn't want her awake to be able to pull on all that stuff. The one surgery that she had, I think after the valve replacement, right? She had the pacemaker in.
Yes.
Because her heart wouldn't stay. So sometimes the pacemaker would have to kick in. And so, but it was just this, so she would wake up sooner off of each medicine that they would try to keep her sedated. She'd start waking up.
Her body was
15 to half an hour earlier before her next round of medicine. And so it was just like, she just burns off this medicine so fast, it seems like, but she just doesn't react like the typical kid would, for whatever reason. So it's just been this constant kind of, working through with the doctors every time of like, here's what's happened in the past. Like, make sure
you need to listen to us.
Like, watch
we know
this
her better than you do, so you need to listen to us.
We know what the chart says, but here's what has actually happened. And so it's just always been interesting every time we go in for one of those. But the worst one though, I mean, it was this last time again, she had the valve replacement and she went in for, she seemed fine to us, but she went in for that routine echo and everything. And he was like, this isn't good. Like
that was about 1.5 years ago. That was our last cardiac procedure.
Yeah. And he was like, I'm surprised that she's as active as she is. Cause she was like, she's like back down, her pressures are back to, where they were pre-surgery. Like he's like, the valve wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing. And again, we were at Peyton Manning Hospital and they, at that point said, we don't feel comfortable going in and doing this again, that she's potentially going to need a different valve. We don't maybe it can be repaired. Like they didn't know. And they were just like, we're not equipped to handle this anymore. Like you're going to have to go to a different hospital, and recommended that we go down to Riley, where they had more qualified, surgeons and stuff like that. And, and so, but they even told us, they were like, she potentially, like, if this isn't going to work, she may need a heart transplant.
Yeah. But then they also said, but with a heart transplant, she might not be a candidate because of all of her other issues. So I think the words he used were, so you guys might need to make some tough decisions. And it's like, as a parent to hear that is horrible.
It was basically like them telling us that she wasn't worth spending a heart, on. So I think that was probably one of the hardest calls. Amongst all this stuff, I mean, we had gone through a lot of things, but that was probably one of the worst.
Yeah. But we went in and they, the cardiologist here at Riley, he went in and he said, I think I can go in with the catheter. And because the main issue with this last time was the leaflets on her valve were they were almost like they were stuck. They weren't moving. So he said, I think I can go in with a balloon catheter and just use the balloon to open up and see if maybe that kind of gets it to start working, and it did. So we were really, really, really pleased with that. It turned out good, and but we still, like I told you, it's like we every time we go into these cardiology appointments, it's just like
kind of bracing yourself.
It's like we have PTSD from these appointments because you just don't ever know what it's, because she's active and doing fine, and then they tell you something different. But
that's the most challenging part of her prognosis moving forward, is how well is that valve going to continue to function and give her
everything else is manageable. Everything else has been manageable, but that has definitely been the most difficult part of her medical journey. I mean, she wears glasses. She's got hearing loss. Like, that's no big deal, Yeah. She has a G-tube. She doesn't eat orally. That's no big deal.
And she's communicating really well.
She doesn't talk, but she can communicate with sign language, and she's got her device. And, like, those are all things that are, like, in the scheme of things, they're no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's where the ABA school and stuff, and especially the one that we're at, has been a huge, just asset to her, that she's learned so much.
Yeah. She's learning,
being around other kids.
Yeah. And just life skills, like brushing your teeth, and just the communication piece has been huge, just because I've been so scared as she gets older that she's not going to be able to communicate with us and just get frustrated.
Yeah.
And frustrated, for us too. So she has an autism diagnosis on top of everything. So we made the decision to send her to an ABA school. She goes there 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday, and has a therapist that works with her one-on-one. And they have just it's truly been like a lifesaver for her, because it's helped her in so many ways. And it's helped all of us, I feel like, in so many ways too, because, just things that are easy for typical parents, like, going out to eat. Like, that's hard for us.
Sure.
And, she doesn't want to sit still. Vacations are hard because you have to think about, like, safety and, are there a bunch of... Yeah.
We did take her on one vacation, my side, and we were staying in a cabin, and it was like when we went, we had to think about, like, okay, like, we're gonna be in this cabin, like, what doors, like, do I need to take, like, things to, like, make sure all the doors are secure, to make sure that, when she's asleep at night, that she can't get out.
Right.
She roams and everything. And
she's too big for, like, a pack and play. Because I remember, traveling with her when she was smaller, it's like we could just put a pack and play in the hotel room and she would sleep in that. But now it's like, what it is, it's still hard. And I still, we went to the zoo this summer, and it's like, I still kind of get anxious doing that, because it's like, what if something happens, or what if, making sure that we have everything that we need, because, do we have G-tube supplies? What if her G-tube comes out and I need to put that back in, and where am I going to do that at? And it's like a constant trying to troubleshoot and be like 2 steps ahead of everything.
And I'm sure there's a balance of trying to be protective, prepared, safe, healthy as possible, while also trying to determine that this medical diagnosis isn't going to define her life, and we're still going to give her the life of being a kid and experiencing life as a family, and do all those things. That has to be a really difficult balance to try to find.
Yeah.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit, and normally I do this up front. Julia, why don't you introduce us to Ruby and introduce us to her and all of the people that are important in her life.
Yeah. So Ruby is just full of energy. She is so happy. She's just happy all the time. And I feel like a lot of people describe her as a light. She just kind of lights up the space and lights up everybody's, heart when she's around them. But she has her dad in her life. She has her stepdad in her life, her stepmom, her big brother, Wesley, and then her little sister, Willow, in her life. And she's got great supportive grandparents on both sides of her family, and aunts and uncles. And she's just she's a lucky kiddo to have such a great support system, but she's definitely... We're the lucky ones.
she's well loved,
Yes.
and she seems to love well.
Yes, for sure. But, yeah.
Little sister Willow, who is 3.5, told me that she shares well.
Yes. Yes.
Which is a pretty big compliment of any sibling, I would say.
Yes.
Eric, how would you describe Ruby's personality?
I would say that she's very adventurous, that I've tried not to shield her a lot. That again, I want her to play and experience and stuff. And so I've always, with all 3 kids, played very roughly. And so she loves to do that. So she loves to jump and anything that kind of gives a little bit of an adrenaline rush, I think that she really enjoys. Jumping on a trampoline and all kinds of stuff that she loves to be kind of adventurous. And run and play, and she just loves anything that gets a reaction out of people. That she does this thing where she just like opens her mouth like she's super surprised because she wants you to do that. That she just loves interacting with people. Like Julia said, that she has a very big support system that I think people just really connect with her. Mm-hmm. That even though she doesn't, communicate and talk, that she just has this connection with people.
Yeah. What's the best part of being her dad?
It's hard. I think that she, loves unconditionally. That she, every time I pick her up from her mom's house or pick her up from school, she's just, overly happy to see me. But I just love just taking care of her and, experiencing things with her. She's just taught us a lot. So, it makes your world completely different when you have, somebody like her. It just changes you as a person. So that's been kind of the biggest reward for myself, I think.
Julia, what about you? What's your favorite part of being Ruby's mom?
I think just seeing her experience new things in her way has been really exciting. I mean, we don't really call them milestones anymore. We call them inch stones. Just seeing her learn how to do something in a, might not be how, her brother learned to do it or how her sister does it, but it's her way of doing it and being so excited, her being so excited to show us that she's learned something new. Yeah. She loves an audience, and there was, and just, wanting us, she'll sign, she wants us to cheer, which is, just to clap for her. And that's my favorite part, is just seeing her learn and experience new things. Yeah.
Yeah. Eric made the comment that she's a teacher. She teaches. What have you learned from her?
Oh my gosh. Patience. For sure. Patience. I've learned not to really sweat the small stuff, things that I feel like before Ruby, I feel like things that I thought were a big deal are like no big deal now. Yeah, you're right. I mean, and what Eric said too, she changes you as a person. I'm a completely different person now than before Ruby was in my life. And I think for the better, for everybody, I think I'm a better mom to Wesley because of Ruby. And I'm grateful for that. And I think, Eric and I both are, better co-parents because of her. And we have to communicate probably more than the, average, co-parents. And I think that putting her, interests first has always been kind of, that's kind of been our like core thing that we kind of have worked through. And
yeah.
Good job, Ruby.
Well, you mentioned that you're co-parenting, and divorce is tough for anybody that goes through it. It's tough when you have kids, and from everything that we've learned in talking to families with kids on rare medical journeys, life transitions, changes, everyday life becomes more complicated. Just dealing with the extras and the planning and the unknowns. And so I'm assuming that divorce isn't any different than that it becomes extra, just one more layer of challenge to work through. And you all have seemed to, like you said, you've communicated better. You've learned how to do this and keep Ruby's best interests, as well as all the kids, front and center. And I'm curious how you've gone about that you might be willing to share, that other families that might find themselves in a similar position, that, maybe they could take something from.
I mean, I think at the core of it, we both have always been in agreement that it's like, whatever the kids need, that's most important. And I think that we have been fortunate that there really have not been a whole lot of things in regards to any of the kids that we just don't really agree on. I think we're respectful of each other's, opinions if there is a difference in opinion, but I think we always have been good about coming together to, okay, what's going to be the better solution? I mean, I think there's times that we've been real angry with each other, but I think it's just, we have to kind of put that aside and realize it's not about us. And I think over time, things have gotten easier. And I think the longer that we've kind of been on this like journey together, I think too, we've kind of figured out what works and what doesn't work. And we both have supportive partners in our lives that, are, because it is a lot to be, I mean, I can't speak for Eric, but it's like, it's a lot it's scary when you're trying to, find a partner that, are they going to accept all this?
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate that from, the beginning, Jason said, I know Ruby's going to live with us for the rest of our life. And that's awesome, And I think that would be, it's hard. It's scary to try to find somebody that is going to be willing to accept all of that. And I'm grateful that I found that in him. And, the connection that they have together is just incredible. And the connection that he and Wesley have together is great. And he does, when I work night shift in the hospital. So it's like when I'm at work, he's taking care of things and getting her, G-tube feedings and meds and getting her off to school and doing all that stuff. So I think it has been helpful that, we both do have supportive partners in our lives and, everybody works together towards the common goal. It takes a village.
Yeah.
And
sure.
we don't, we're kind of on an island here where both of our families are very supportive, but they don't live here super close. So we kind of have to rely on each other. And I think from the beginning, we've kind of told each other that, we do have to rely on each other for help. And I think also a lot of the experiences that we have been through with her medically, it's like we both kind of, you said to me before, you're like, you're the only person that knows what it's like to open her door and not know what we're going to find, Like we've had those conversations before. And I think that kind of is something that we can kind of bond over.
Yeah. And,
that really kind of, that kind of seriousness of stuff kind of wakes you up to the fact that like, just bickering over little things, it's like, it's not
you have
important.
a much larger common purpose.
Right. Yeah.
Eric, is there anything that you would add to kind of that dynamic and how you've been able to keep Ruby's care front and center?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like think getting over the humility of it all, like just in trying to separate yourself, that, it was, our problems were our problems. It wasn't Ruby's problem, and so, the divorce had nothing to do with Ruby or Wes or anything like that. So, so it's just, it took some time. I mean, the first year to 2 years, I mean, it was, there was a lot of just, wordless drop-offs and pickups and stuff like that, that it was just like, tell me what I need to know. Has anything changed? Anything that, did anything go wrong this, this visit or whatever? And we always agreed on 50-50, like, neither of us are moving away anywhere far. We've stayed, close to make it super, super easy. Because I want to see the kids. I want to have them. That's not why, we separated. And so, so it was hard, I think, at first to like, separate those issues, but it was just took some time to just say like, okay, like this is over now. Like this is, we don't need to bring that into, the care for the kids. And so, we've been able to, kind of come to peace, I think, with everything. And it's just coming to terms with that. I think it was the hardest part, was just like, in order to do the best thing for, for her, is to just, is just separate those two issues and kind of get past it. And again, it took time, but it was just that willingness to be like, okay. And, I think we finally even, we spent an entire day, during her last cardiology procedure, because it was still kind of during COVID and everything. And so only people at the hospital that were allowed to be there were us, and we had to stay in our own little pod too. We couldn't, they assigned us a little sitting section that we could wait in. And so, we spent an entire day sitting together, with nobody but ourselves, each other to talk to. And I think even at that point, like we kind of both kind of apologized to each other and kind of, we were like, I think we're finally in a good place. Like, we both, had supported partners, and, we've just kind of moved on. And so, it's just kind of getting to that point of like, stop being angry at each other. And just
I think that's what it was. I think for the first couple of years, I think we were just both angry and had hurt feelings, and I think that it just took time.
Yeah, sure, and that's understandable. I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I just that's just kind of the hardest step, I think, was just being able to say that, and just being able to just kind of acknowledge what had happened, and just kind of let go of the anger and just focus on the kids, and to the point where now we can we can have those conversations, and we can, easily then, coordinate, our schedules and stuff. It's not a battle of, your time versus my time and stuff like that. It's a very even schedule. And we've, Jen and I bought our house, in the same, we're in the same school district, so Wes has been able to ride the bus to or from either house. And he kind of has free reign to do that too, that, he can get on the bus at our house, he can get off the bus at mom's house, whatever. And then, her ABA school is 10 minutes from both of our houses. So we've stayed very, very close, in order to make all that stuff just very fluid, because, that's just been very important to us, that it's, that transition between houses is super easy. And that we both get our time, and, but even just respecting each other's time, I think, we've been very good about, I think one of the benefits to us, being separated is that, you almost have that built-in respite time that it's, that other people don't get, and hopefully they have family around, or like, but like Julia said, that we don't have, our family that are just, hey, can you pick up from school or whatever? Like, we don't have that resource. It's the four of us. It's, that, if I'm supposed to be picking up, but if I can't, then, I can call Jen, and Jen goes over and picks up.
Yeah. Or you can call Jason and he comes, you know what I mean? Like the four of us can all kind of work together and
somebody's always around to make sure it gets done, but we are able to go on vacation. We're able to, taking care of, Ruby or, any other, child with special needs is exhausting. It's, there's just a lot of things mentally that it takes, and so having that built in, I think has really saved us too, that we both, our stress levels can be down a little bit more because we're not on 24/7 either. Right. Is that we have a trusting, partner that we can, because even giving, handing them over, to grandma or grandpa, they kind of know what to do sometimes, but, but that's, you never, I don't think, feel as comfortable as you do with another parent.
Sure. Because they're not doing it all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for somebody to be able to leave on vacation and for them to be able to have a relaxing week, because even taking her on vacation, I mean, then you're,
that's added stress.
Yeah, it's added stress to a vacation.
Sure, yeah. So, it's not a vacation.
Right.
So being able to have those family vacations, but also being able to have those individual vacations where we can, we know that she's well taken care of, that I think that has really helped too with bringing our, keeping our stress under control. Yeah. That it makes our schedules very well. I can't imagine walking away and saying that I didn't want, her, or it was too much for me. So I think one, you just have to be willing to take on that challenge to begin with, that, hopefully, they're not walking away because they can't handle the situation as a whole. That's kind of the first step, that if you just really just don't feel like you can handle that situation, you don't feel like you can take care of a special needs child, again, there has to be that trust. And, I hope I demonstrated that I, was capable and wanted to be there, wanted to be at the doctor's appointments and everything, as awkward as it may have been to be sitting in a doctor's office room, sitting there, by ourselves for a little while. I did it, and it was, we came to terms with that to make sure that we were both well informed. So it's just having that willingness to participate. But aside from that, I think the one thing that I wish would have happened earlier on was just having a lot more open conversations. Yeah. Again, just to be able to, as hard as it may have been to have those conversations, but just being more open to having those conversations of like, why things were happening or what decisions were being made and whatever, apologizing or whatever it is, but trying to get past that anger, and letting that go as fast as possible. Again, it's easy to look back at that and be like, okay, but, it took us a while to both get into a place where we were happy again in our own lives to be able to come back together and be happy for each other. Mm-hmm. So it does, it just takes time. Yeah. But it's just, again, trying to not make those issues into the kids' issues. Yeah. Or making it harder for them. Yeah. And just being open to having those conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. Julie, what about you for a mom that finds herself in a similar position?
Yeah, I think, and I am kind of piggyback off of that. I think being able to have those hard conversations, I think for a long time, like I was really angry, and in a span of like a year, I had a new baby with all these health concerns, and then, we had gotten divorced like about a year after she was born. So it was like my whole life had kind of been turned upside down, and initially it wasn't something that I was seeking. So I think being able to kind of like reach out to have those conversations with him, that I think if I would have put myself out there more to have those conversations with him, to kind of understand why things happened the way they did, I think I would have gotten over some of that anger and, hurt a little sooner. And then we would have been able to, it kind of makes me sad that like we did spend all that time that we just, weren't communicating, or we're just angry with each other. And, I'm sure that, Wesley saw that, and I feel terrible about that. And it's like, that's not anything that I want him to see. And I think and he's even said, like, he just is so happy that, like, he is so grateful that he has, these, two parts of his family, because, he said he gets, different things from different pieces of each family. And I'm sure, it's less awkward and uncomfortable for him when we can all be around each other, But yeah, I think just kind of putting your pride aside and like trying to have those hard conversations initially to kind of work through things and forgive and apologize and just kind of move forward and realize that, the kids are what's most important. And I think I'm happier because I did let that, got to the point to let all that go. We both are, I feel like, happy and successful in our own, individual situations now. And I'm so grateful that, that Eric is in their life, and he is a fantastic dad. And I'm so grateful that, he's provided them with everything that he's been able to provide for them. And I think that, we're both very, to use the word blessed, we're both very blessed that we have, found ourselves in the situations that we are in with supportive partners. And I feel comfortable, if Eric's at work and Jen's home with all three kids, like, I feel so comfortable, and secure in her abilities to, take care of what needs to be taken care of. And I hope Eric feels the same way when Jason's here. And I just, sorry, long-winded, but just,
no, that's great.
But yeah, I just think, the communication thing, and I think just kind of putting your pride aside. Yeah. Cause it's hard. Yeah. Divorce is hard.
The small stuff, again, it's like the kids come back and something seems off, or she's got a diaper rash or something. And it was like kind of that constant, like, oh, what did you do?
Right.
Like, and then, so it was kind of using that, anger and stuff. And again, it's just kind of taking us some time to just kind of get past that, of just being like, hey,
things happen.
These are kids, and just
like
anybody else. And
recognizing that the other person actually really does have the same love, the same best interests, and all that stuff.
They're not they're not sitting around not being tended to or being ignored or whatever. We know that each of us has been doing our best, at all times. And so it's just getting rid of all that small stuff of not trying to use them, as weapons of anger or anything, jabs at each other back and forth. Why does she have this bruise? Why does she, with her, all of her other conditions and stuff. She bruises like a peach, and she has bruises all the time. But so it's just one of those things of just like, we know that, like, it's like, it's not like somebody wasn't watching her or somebody wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing or whatever. It's just, accepting the whole situation as it is.
At Go Shout Love, we do amazing things for amazing families with kids on rare medical journeys. Each month we shout love for families through the sale of creative apparel inspired by the kids. This month's Stay Curious design is inspired by Oren, Ruby, and Stella. 3 amazing kids who are always up for an adventure and shine a bright light wherever they go. Every purchase in January will help with the cost of adaptive bicycles for Ruby and Stella and a special trip for Oren and his family. Visit our website at goshout.love to support these 3 amazing kids through the purchase of a t-shirt, hat, sweatshirt, hoodie, or other items.